I'm Dr. Connie. I'm your host of Mind Your Health podcast. I share my unique perspective both as a practitioner and a patient battling autoimmune condition for over 25 years because I had to figure things out on my own, and my education and my practical approach as a patient allows me to truly integrate it so that you can be whole and the burden of sick care is no longer your own burden to carry. And this is what we help you with in this podcast. Alrighty. So, hi, Dan. Welcome to my podcast. This is Mind Your Health, all about empowering individuals to take control over their health and their lives. And I've known you for quite some time, and I've been admiring you from afar. And I found out little bits and pieces, and you have an amazing yoga practice. But something struck me as you are so different the way you walk in. And I believe success leaves clues, and how you do anything is how you do everything. And when you're in that yoga class, you're so super focused, and you are so you're so concentrating on your poses, and you work really, really hard, and you're always smiling and upbeat. At my studio, it's like you bring the sunshine in every time. There's not a bad day with you.
Goodness.
And I had a little bit of what really struck me was when you brought in your son. And I just love that side of you, like of you being your dad. And then you brought your wife, and then I read all about you, and you're very much a family man. And so there's a lot of questions that I want to ask. And I found out later that you're an author of 2 amazing books that you gifted me. And it just got me thinking a lot about, oh my gosh. And you and I have been trying to get together for a long time. So I'm just going to just take it and ask you a bunch of questions about you.
Before you do though, let me just acknowledge that and thank you, because it's interesting. You never know how you're perceived, and the first time you walk into a yoga studio, I mean, you don't know what to expect, and it, the experiences have been far different because people run their studios extremely differently. And what I absolutely love about your studio, Connie, is your focus on posture, your focus on alignment, the meticulous nature, and the way you look at yoga as an essential element toward integrated health is so powerful. Of course, you have the background with your medical expertise, and as a functional medicine doctor, you have so much breadth in terms of your understanding of the human body, of physiology. And it's just like, I'm beginning to understand now, having practiced there, probably like a year and a half with you. Mm-hmm. Like I'm starting to see those benefits show up in my life in new and different ways. And it's just amazing how that journey continues to transform over time. So thank you for what you've given to me.
Yeah, well, you're a delight, and every one of my instructors love it when you come by. So that says a lot about you. So, tell me a little bit about the research that you were doing, because I saw, and then when I broke down all the numbers, and because it was sliding by so fast, it was intriguing to me. It was mostly younger generation people, and very few baby boomers and beyond. And so tell me a little bit about what initiated this research and what you found.
Okay, great. So the book Positive Chaos came out last year. That's my most recent book. And in that book, I make the case that we're kind of beyond the time of dealing with change, change management. Oh, something's changing and we need adjust our posture to deal with this change. Well, it's not one thing changing. It's everything changing and transforming faster than we can even keep up with, because all of the systems in our world, all of the global connections in terms of communication, the economies, the political environments, geopolitical environments, it's just everything is transforming, and of course being driven by technology and AI and all of that at exponential rates, such that at this moment in time, our future is totally unpredictable. And there are so many potential paths which we can go. So like a leader is put in this position of saying like, well, how do I predict the future. Where do I place my bets in terms of my resources and my team? How do I project confidence into this environment? And the leaders who say, this is what's going to happen, this is where we're going with certainty, those leaders are now being perceived as basically untrustworthy, because everybody knows we don't know where we're going. And so this idea of how do we exist in this environment where things are so open-ended. And so I look at that as, that's the definition of chaos. A chaotic system is one where there are so many potential changes that little things affect everything in huge ways. And there's a science behind studying that, which we can go into a little bit later. And so we did the first ever state of chaos study. And this was really trying to measure the impact of chaos on the American workforce, how it was being perceived, where it was showing up in people's lives. And yes, it's off the charts. We learned some things that were just mind-boggling to me. Like 1 out of every 4 working Americans thinks about quitting at least once every single day. 6% of working Americans think about suicide at least once every single day. So this epidemic of lack of purpose, lack of sense of meaning in people's lives, and just the concern that they have over their finances, over their loved ones, over their health, and over their ability to control the destiny of their own lives is terrifying. And yes, to your point, it's in the youngest generations where we see this most pronounced. And these are the kids who've been brought up in this uncertainty, and of course dealing with COVID at these ages where they're either just entering high school or college or the workforce. And so there's a lot of skepticism around what's predictable and what's going to happen in the world.
Yeah. So I noticed that there were 3 things at the top of that list. Was they wanted peace of mind, better mental health, and more confidence were among the top 3. And I saw in that research, anxiety was way up there at the top as well. And these numbers don't lie, right? I mean, these are some serious things that they're thinking about. So negative. So tell me a little bit more about like your approach in terms of changing that perspective.
Right. Well, so the book really tries to position chaos as neither it's neutral. It's just the state we're in. It's not negative. It's not positive. We change it in the way we perceive it, and then the way we align to interact with it. Right. And so when we, obviously my book goes into great depth in this and takes you through a process of transformation, which I can take you through in just a minute. The other thing that we do is I do a lot of keynote speeches. And so I'm brought in quite often as either the opening conference general session speaker or the closing speaker to kick off a conference. And the reason that people hire me for that is because my speeches are not just a talking head.
Yeah.
I use the total physicality of what I do, all the skills that I've cultivated through my life, and really my background as an entertainer, as a performer, which is how I paid for college, how I got my business degree. And so all of that kind of unites into this keynote experience, really, where I bring all of that to the table. And so it's uplifting, it's encouraging, and I try to help people understand you can have 2 totally different experiences in the same environment.
Yeah. So tell me some of the things that you do, because I know you're an acrobat, and I saw images of you doing handstands, and we just talked about
rather than tell you, would you like for me to just show you?
Absolutely.
All right, we can do that. All right. So Connie, so we're in our studio here in Georgia, where we really invented this space out of COVID when we couldn't no longer go to conferences and events, and we had to inspire audiences from a distance. And so this is our learning center where we do our live streaming programs and where we talk to our clients and our coaches, our audiences all the time. So you mentioned balance, this notion of balance. And I love how yoga teaches balance. But I think the phraseology people use is so wrong. I wrote a book actually called Off Balance on Purpose. And this is basically to liberate you from this idea of trying to achieve balance. People say, I just need to achieve balance in my life. I need to attain balance. Well, balance is never what you get. Balance is what you do. And we're constantly balancing and making choices about where we place our focus, our attention, how we use our resources, and how we respond to uncertainty. And so when we think of the uncertainty in our lives, I use this platform here, this lectern, to talk about how those platforms can seem very solid, but when they're hit with some outside force, they're constantly shifting. And so how do you position yourself on top of those changes? Watch close.
Amazing.
But the key is, if you look closely, you'll see I'm not balanced. I'm balancing. I'm making constant adjustments and corrections. And after all that work and after all that effort, I'm still in the same place. I haven't gone anywhere, right? And this is how most people deal with the uncertainty. They try to protect what they have, to keep doing what they're doing, and to stay where they're at, which you cannot do. And so I try to inspire people to go off balance on purpose, which means many things. It means connected to that sense of purpose, mission, meaning that you have in life, and then being on purpose, intentional about leaning into the uncertainty and not trying to be biased toward everything, but toward what really matters to you.
Yeah, that's so amazing, because what I find in the context of what we're talking about, as I was saying, with the underlying health issues, a lot of people, let's say they have a crisis of some sort, they immediately go into this mental chaos and life chaos because they've projected into the future of what they don't know. And all that stems from is their fear. But I love how we talked one time after a class, and you tried to explain to me how, Connie, balance isn't something you achieve. It is something dynamic. It's something you have to always adjust tiny little bits. And I love how you say that, because who you are today won't be the same tomorrow. And just as you showed us on your handstand, there's some dynamic little adjustments you're making constantly through your hands, through your elbows, through your shoulders, through your core, through your legs. I saw you moving a little bit. And without that, you never really learn. And I love how you said how you lean into the uncertainty on purpose without a guarantee of what's on the other side. Because
that's right.
Yeah.
And you're doing that not just in your health, not just in your work, but in all of the 5 spheres of your influence. And so this is also a really key component of this book, is like, you think about your work, your relationships, your health, your spirit, and your passions or your personal interests.
Is that the 5 spheres?
Yes, yes. And if you think of these as 5 different projects that are independent of each other, you're never going to have enough time. And you're always frustrated because they seem like they're competing with each other. But instead of trying to keep them separate, what we need to do is connect them. So we say, how does our work support our relationships? We provide for those we love. We go back to our friends and family. We get re-energized. We bring that back into our work. We create great relationships at work, right? And so this is dynamic, again, to your point. And if you build that connection, or I call it a lifeline, that helps you withstand those changes. So what we're doing is we're working on the infrastructure of a life. How does your work support your health? Does your job challenge your health mentally or physically? And if so, over time, how do you realign that? Because that's not sustainable. They should grow together, right? In your job, are you renewing your spirit and practicing your spiritual principles? Are you pursuing your passions and in a field like that really genuinely interests you, and learning about the passions of the people around you? Are we in relationships, our most personal relationships? Are you aligned in terms of how you support each other in health, in growing spiritually, and in pursuing your passions and interests? And so this book goes into the 10 lifelines of how we build that connection of the infrastructure of a connected and aligned life, so that when it is in motion, it's not going to be balanced. It's always changing and transforming in new ways, but it's aligned. It's connected. It's stable. and we have that stability built in because we've worked hard. And now you're not making choices, this versus that. You're saying, how does this affect the totality of who I am? And how do I unleash like more of my uniqueness and capacity so I can bring that into the world? But to your point, it definitely starts with health. And for me, that's always been a physical discipline. I was a very hyperactive kid. I was getting in trouble in school all the time, at home and at school. And no matter what, people were like reprimanding me for my bountiful physical nature, right? But I found a way to channel that into something beneficial when I learned how to juggle, right? When I was 11 years old at a Renaissance festival. And it's in this physical discipline, these 5 spheres, right, that I found a lot of these principles about patterns, about how patterns are necessary in order for you to manage complexity, how when you add more to what you do, you have to learn new patterns and transform the patterns that you understood before, how mastering the technique and the point of focus is so important, right? So for example, juggling, people think juggling is about making amazing catches. No, it's about making increasingly better throws. Because if your throws are accurate, if they're consistent, then the catches just kind of happen, right? And so in our own lives, are we making the right throws, the right inputs in terms of how you respond in certain situations? When you're confronting a challenge to your health or conflict with someone you love and care about, what's your default? What's your response? What are you orienting to? And then instead of getting overwhelmed and feeling like you have to handle it all at once, well, juggling also teaches you, no, it's still just one thing at a time. And there's space between the throws and the catches. And if we can slow it down, we can see the pattern and we can elevate the inputs, the throws, to a much higher level. So yeah, in the physicality of what I do, the analogies and the practical demonstrations are pretty cool and pretty limitless, actually. I'm going to sit back down.
Yeah, that is so amazing, Dan. I love that because recently I was reading a book and I think Viktor Frankl said this. He said, between a stimulus and your response, there's that space.
Yes.
Just like you were throwing the ball, if you were being reactive, not responsive, then you would be missing all the throws.
Correct.
You won't be focusing on how well you're throwing. You're just going to be hell-bent on catching. And you lose sight of it and you react and everything becomes just complete mess. And you're not giving yourself, because you said every time you threw a ball, there was that space. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, and when you think about it, have you ever read Eckhart Tolle?
Yes.
The Power of Now. One of my most influential books of my life. I actually read this book over and over again on Audible. Often when I'm doing my unicycle rides through the woods. It's like the most awesome meditation. And because really all you ever get is the now.
Yeah.
And the moments of your life, right? And so who you are and what you've become in any respect, any of those 5 spheres, is how you've leveraged the moments of your past.
Yeah.
And so if we want to get healthier, if we want to get better in any way, we first have to become more committed and skilled at being in the moment.
Yeah.
And like you said, instead of reacting, responding and elevating those responses. And that's where chaos really gets cool, because then you realize you can use today's changes and the unique nature of our environment to your advantage. And you can create change through intentionality faster than ever before.
Yeah. With deliberate action. The other thing recently I read is the concept is, they were talking about, it's a spiritual book that I was reading, and it was referencing time, how time is a construct. And in the chaotic environment, we lose time just worrying about the thing, right? But when we can really adapt, like Einstein time is abundant. And to your point with the 5 pillars or 5 spheres, you know how you said it's dynamic, it's never equal parts, but it's always integrated whole because it's always aligned with you. Not the Dan who wants to be like the social media, not the Dan you're not Tony Robbins, you're Dan Thurman, you know what I mean, in your own right. You have your unique ability. And I think that's the gift that you share, is your perspective. And I think if everybody can own that, we can all make so much more time. We can all have purpose. And I think this world will be a happier place in that regard. And so I love your perspective in talking about this, because I can see how this can be revolutionary in the corporate America and in any corporations. Like, because you mostly talk to corporate culture, from my understanding.
Yes, across a lot of different industries and audiences. Sometimes it's sales audiences. Sometimes it's technology companies or their users. So a software company might have a user conference for all of their customers, and these types of events. And so all sorts of different venues. But what I'm talking about is the human condition. And so my message is very flexible in that regard, where I can learn a few things about my client, really understand their objectives and their audience, and then adapt it to really speak to this. And it's very liberating and fulfilling. And the idea is hopefully to help them feel less overwhelmed and more inspired and powerful to make those changes. And so they leave with some plans and blueprints and a different mindset. It's so much about the mindset, because if you get the mindset right, then you kind of know what to do.
Yeah.
Right.
It's everything, in my opinion. I think that's where we get stuck. But also, you had mentioned 10 lifelines. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. And so in Off Balance on Purpose, so that's this lower book here, my last book. So we think about the 5 spheres and building out that pattern concept, and then the lifelines, and that's kind of like the central third of that book, which is how to really shape and design your life pattern, right? And so for every one of those lifelines, so let's start with health. So because you're really focused on health. How does your health affect your job? How does your health affect your relationships? And for every one of those connections, it's reciprocal, because you can look at it and say, what can I do in the area of my health? Or if I were to improve my health, if I were to improve my mental or physical well-being, how would that change the nature of what I'm able to do for people with my work, or in my relationships, or in my faith and my spiritual gifts, or my personal passions and interests, right? And then you can also say, how do I go to those aspects of my life and bring back gifts that reinform my health and help me grow in that area? So they're reciprocal in nature, and they're super powerful in practice. And in that chapter about lifelines, I give, just as an example, 10 specific things you could do to strengthen each of the 10 lifelines. So there's 100 different connections. But there's simple things that you can think of, like when you work out with a friend, or you do something physical, but you do it for a cause or a volunteer effort, or something that's connected to your spiritual gifts and philanthropy, or you're aligning your work to support something that you just really care about in that way. There's so many different dynamics, but the idea is to get you thinking 3-dimensionally about your life, and it makes it fun, because you can try to find ways to activate not just this or that, but all of it at once. Like, Eddie, my son, you mentioned, it was here for the summer. And one of the things we did is we rented kayaks, and we went down the Chattahoochee River right near our house, and we spent a couple hours on the Chattahoochee, and I always wanted to do it. And so it was just a matter of trying to figure that out. And it was this relationship lifeline where neither one of us were looking at a screen. We were on the water in nature. It was very spiritual. It was early in the morning. There was the fog on the river, and it was physical, so we've got all these different things going at once. And that's kind of the way I look at my work as well. And certainly it's what you do professionally for people is, you're in there sweating every day yourself as you're helping people grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is so good. So Lifeline is one of those things that you do with a multi-purpose, checking off many different boxes of your spheres.
Yes, correct.
And connecting everything with intention deliberately, and then making meaning out of them and being fully present, like Eckhart Tolle.
For sure.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's amazing. So I want to ask you, you talk a lot about leadership. And to me, I've had to learn, even though I'm an entrepreneur, I don't think I've ever considered myself a leader until I realized I better lead my ship or else. Then I had to really learn leadership and really grow into it, if you will. Coming from the Asian background, we're always really, really trained from very young to stay on the sidelines as a female, lesser than male counterparts, especially in my era, especially in my parents' era. That was how the belief system was. Well, it shifted quickly, fast when I got into my, midlife and so forth. So everything, my cultural background has shifted greatly from this perspective. But so this idea of leadership really, really came to me when I became a parent, because I have to lead my children. And then as they get older, it just becomes a full responsibility, because what I say impacts my kids in ways that my parents impacted me. And so I'm very self-aware, and it's been like so much of a challenge to be the model for my children that they need. And so I want you to speak to how you deal with leadership, because I've seen you with your son, and I know about your wife, and I know you do that so well. And I know that's a priority, ever shifting, but that's a priority for you. So I want to ask you, through all the work that you do and traveling through 33 countries and all the continents, and you still have a family life, and you talk about family work-life balance too. So tell me your version.
Well, my greatest immersion into the field of leadership has to do with my professional association, the National Speakers Association. We run a pretty tight ship here, and usually I'm just responsible for myself and where I go and making sure I get to my events and I take care of things. And I have an amazing employee, Stephanie Craig, who's actually the one switching cameras for us right now. And Stephanie is my number one. She makes sure all my gear is where it needs to be, and so my relationship with Stephanie is super important in terms of leadership. Really, it's more like leading by example and delegation with trust and accountability to someone who I know 100% has my back. And that's rare in this world.
It is.
But when I stepped up in my professional association, so National Speakers Association, or NSA, is it's a trade association of people who speak professionally, either doing keynotes or training or consulting, or they're authors or podcasters or whatever. They use the spoken word in an entrepreneurial way to grow a business. In fact, I'd like to invite you to come with me one day to a Georgia meeting, because I think you'd totally dig it. But I've been a part of this organization for 30 years. I mean, I started when I was 25, 26 years old, and I grew my business. It was such a gift to my life that I eventually became a board member. And then in 2018, 2019, I was president of the entire national organization, over 2,000 members from around the world, multiple events, big deal, and full staff. And so it's something at a much higher level. And it's leading volunteers, which is way different than leading a staff that you pay, and you have that incentive structure sort of built in. But I tell you what, I'm going to slide over to the third set to give you some insights about this from over there. Hold on. Okay. So this is from the new book, Positive Chaos, but it really kind of gets into the area that you're talking about, Connie, relative to leadership, because ultimately the question is, how do you get people to do what you want them to do, or to help you figure out to trust you enough to engage in something collaborative where we can make something incredible happen in the world, And to all of the things we started with, the discretionary effort people are willing to give is a lot less than it used to be. After COVID, there's this whole new renegotiation about how much I'm going to work and what I'm willing to do and what I'll say yes to and what I will pretend I'm going to do, but I'm not going to do it. You can't make me do it, right? And so when I think about it kind of in these three areas here: willingness, ability, and capacity. And so willingness is that motivated, area, the answer to the question, why does this even matter? And like, am I willing to do what it takes, whatever it takes to make it happen? It's the incentives that we experience both externally and internally. So we get the sense of purpose. Maybe there's some external rewards. We see a pathway forward and we say, yes, I am honestly willing to do it. But like, am I willing to do whatever it takes? We don't know, because we don't really know what it's going to take. And what we thought it might take is now not enough. And so we're constantly asking and re-answering this question of willingness. And in my experience, most people are not honest with themselves about this, which is why they buy the books and they take the courses and they do the thing and they buy the membership, but they're not really going to show up. They want to feel like they're going to show up, right? So we have to help people become more willing and more honest, because if you're throwing money or throwing promises at something you're unwilling to do, you're just reinforcing that loop of negating your intentions and discouraging you ultimately from what you want to do. So when you can let go of those things you're unwilling to do, you create huge rewards. But if you are willing, then you say, okay, well then what do I need to do? Right? So that's the answer to the question, what do we need to do? And we can find the coaches and the skills and the knowledge and the books and all of the pathways, which information's out there. You can pretty much learn how to do anything in this world. The third sphere is the capacity sphere, right? Which is the answer to the question, all right, how much? How much can you handle? How much can you take? How much time do you like? Time, energy, money, thought. Those are the resources we look at and we go, we only have so much of that in a day, in a week, in a lifetime. I don't know what to do, right? But yet we all know people who have they're very busy and yet incredibly productive. And if you want something done, give it to a busy person, etc. So there's this notion that we can use those resources to stretch our capacity and to find new ways to connect what matters most, like with the spheres. And so we want to grow our capacity and our comfort in the midst of the change, because this little bit right here, whether you're leading a team or you think about this for yourself, that's all that ever gets done anywhere in the world, is that which people are honestly willing to do. They've developed the ability to pull it off, and then the capacity within themselves or within your team to make it happen. And so as a leader, you want to be thinking about, where's the deficit for me right now? Where do I need to place more attention? What am I unwilling to do? What do I need to learn next? And maybe I need to grow some capacity and develop the strength or the thick skin or the comfort in the midst of the chaos to make it happen.
Yeah, this is so good. I love what you said about the most profound thing is most people are not honest about what they are willing to do. Like, honestly, I've had a lot of employees and you've seen many turnovers even at my studio, even the short time that you've been there. And I think this is a human condition. And to your point, what you said post-COVID, Dan, for small business owners like me, navigating this workforce and hiring the right people who are willing to do work after COVID has been a serious challenge. Because all of a sudden, people are just used to not doing the work. I just get blown away at what they expect. It's almost like this. I don't know, everybody that comes into my studio that I've tried to hire that didn't work out, it's almost like a diva syndrome, And you're right.
they've been told that it's much easier to take shortcuts and that they should be able to immediately jump to making a lot of money and doing whatever they want,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And they and you know, to some extent those pathways really do exist.
Yeah.
You know, for the right people, but it's kind of like you got to get a little lucky and you've got to be focused. And I'll tell you what, because my daughter Maggie, you haven't met Maggie, I don't think.
I don't think I met Maggie.
She's been to your studio. She's taken classes with me there as well. But she lives in Los Angeles because Maggie is an actress and a social media influencer. We have kind of a story together. I don't even know if you know about this, but Maggie has 5.5 million followers on TikTok. We did a podcast together for 2.5 years, and a lot of our content was around the father-daughter relationship and dynamic. And Maggie, you know, has done very well for herself. She's 22 years old in that whole world, but she's done it because she's willing to do whatever it takes in the context of her principles, of her faith, of her character. I'm so proud of her for making smart choices and for saying no to the temptations that could take you down terrible roads in that arena. And then she's got amazing skills, and a lot of that she learned from our family, but a lot of it she's developed on her own, and she brings these gifts into her world. And then she just continues to stretch and to grow, and she's taking classes and she's trying new things. And so it appears from the outside that it looks easy, but like anything, you know, when it looks easy, what we know is that's the result of some really hard work and some intentional effort.
Yeah.
And ultimately, even if you get the quick victory in life, you don't understand it and you don't own it and you can't keep it because it's not yours until you essentially pay for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I so understand. For Maggie and the likes of Maggie, the amount of discipline that requires for you to show up that way for your audience, it's no accident that she has over 5 million followers. I know that that's sweat, hard tears, and that's just a lot of work on her end. It just doesn't happen. It's by freak accident. And frankly, a lot of people want to be like Maggie and probably boohoo like the effort behind the scenes and the principles that she lives by. But I know because I've met a lot that I used to think, oh my gosh, what is this? It's a brand new way to do business. And yeah, I totally agree with what you said. It's got to be replicable and you have to have staying power. In order for you to have staying power, you've got to have passion. Like I said at the beginning, entrepreneurship is a spiritual journey. It's not about the money. It's not about the popularity contest. You have to be who you are and you have to work at it. And Maggie's growing. You know what I mean? Well, she's not letting it get to her head.
I think especially now.
Yeah.
I think especially now it's a spiritual journey because if you don't have some connection to something bigger than you and bigger than your dream, right? Then I think that it's just so hard, you know, because again, chaos is everywhere, right? And in fact, while we're here, I could take you through a few of those principles about chaos if you wish.
Yes.
So okay, first of all, you know, so here we are. We're in this big world of uncertainty where change is happening, like we talked about, faster than ever before, and the unknowability. Right? It's not just that the future is uncertain. I mean, it's like a story that's not been written, right? But it's unknowable in so many ways. But if we don't have to look at it as chaos, as disorder and confusion. And if you pay attention right now to when you hear the word chaos, how is it being used? It's being used to frighten you. Yeah. It's being used to lower your expectations. Yeah, and to keep you in that constant state of like, stay addicted to your devices,
and there's no solution for it. It's just a state of affairs.
But it's not. That's not what it is. This is the guy who started it all and came up with the idea of chaos theory, Edward Norton Lorenz. Okay. And he was a climatologist and a mathematician, and he was trying to predict the weather. And so he was crunching all these different models and getting all the information and trying to predict weather. And he realized he couldn't get it exactly right. And there was this idea of the predictability horizon. Maybe in a day I could get it right, but in 2 days or 3 days, or like no, you can't know. It's unknowable because, and he concluded, the little things he couldn't measure would amplify over time in enormous and divergent ways. He called this the butterfly effect. And that's the idea that theoretically a butterfly flapping its wings could change or start a hurricane like hundreds of miles away. Very catchy idea. Little things change everything. Okay. But then he started to plot randomness. And so he generated all these random differential equations, started plotting their solutions, and he found patterns. He found this loop that looks like the wings of a butterfly, but it's these like infinite loops over and over again on multiple different planes. It's also very much like the juggling pattern. If you think about it, it's the same kind of figure eight. So the idea here, okay, two things. There are patterns, we just don't necessarily see them yet. But if we look for patterns, and if we are aware of the patterns that we're creating, right, and the patterns that we've been living in for so long, then we could take greater ownership, and the little things change everything. So your inputs, your responses, the little things change everything in unknowable ways. So my point here, Connie, is instead of playing defense against the chaos that you cannot control, we go on offense and we create positive chaos that comes from us through the clarity of your heightened intentions and your connections to your principles, your spiritual growth, your faith, your family, whatever it is that most matters in your life. And we start changing things, elevating our words, elevating our interactions with others in just little small ways, and playing, experimenting. And what you will create will be these enormous ripples over time that you can't even predict. Okay. And so instead of playing defense against chaos, and like we talked about with the research, this is the reality most people are experiencing. It's random, like the lightning, and it's challenging, hectic, anxious, overwhelming stress. Okay. It's too hard. It's too fast. I feel that anxiety, which is just negative projection about the future, right? I feel like the future is going to be harmful, be bad. I don't want, I don't even want to be there. It's too much. It's now or never. And it's all on me. So I'm stressed out all the time. Distress, not eustress, which is the positive stress, but I'm stressed out. Okay. So this reality exists, right? But with the right mindset and with the right skill set, the same acronym becomes positive, right? So it is challenging. It's going to be hard, but that's okay. It's good. It's an intentional challenge, and you get to choose how you'll improve yourself, what you're working toward in the world. So we choose our intentional struggles. We show up for our yoga class. We work on the business. We hire the employees. We figure it out, right? Because we got a reason. Instead of hectic and racing around in a frantic way, no, we're taking our time. We're prioritizing our mental and physical well-being. We're finding the spaces between the throws and catches. We're going healthy on this. And then instead of anxiety, which is the fearful view, we're aspiring, we're looking up, right? Toward the targets and toward the goals and toward what's possible. Because here's the thing, those coexist. The fearful future and the amazing future it's not an either or thing. They both exist right now. The question is, what do you want to be a part of? What are you thinking about? What are you talking about? And what are you bringing into your own life? And then we begin to see the patterns, right? Instead of it being overwhelming because it's now or never, then you begin to see, no, it's now and always. It's these loops that just keep happening. And what we're dealing with, it's not as unprecedented as you think. It's a new version of something you've always been dealing with. In fact, because you haven't handled it in the past, it keeps showing up in bigger ways until it eventually gets your attention. And until you're willing to do the courageous thing that says, I'm going to try something I've never done before. I'm going to say something I've never said before. And I have no idea where this is going to take me, but I do know it's more congruent with what I want in the world. Then, things happen in amazing ways. And then you begin to see the patterns and the synergy of how it all fits together. So in a nutshell, that's kind of like the whole gist of this book, Positive Chaos.
Yeah, I love, love, love it, because whether I know that, a lot of people like, I don't know if you know the book, The Secret Law of Attraction, but then there
Sure
is
do.
also the law of cause and effect, right? And really, the cause is your subconscious mind, and then the effect is your conscious mind. Its effect is you reacting to everything. And a lot of people live at the effect of their lives. So circumstances cause chaos in a negative domain, the slide prior to this one, right?
Mhm.
But if you really, really sit and understand cause and effect, because it's one of the Hermetic laws, it's a law.
Right.
Well, you get to choose. And I think in essence, you said exactly that. This is so spiritual to me, because this simple shift coexists, like you said. And the biggest thing is that space between, we always have a choice. And that
That's right.
choice to coexist. One can be very negative, one can be very positive. When we're talking about your patterns, what patterns are generating in your life, because what you see in your life, and then the people you're attracting, circumstances you're attracting. And that's what I meant. It's this idea of empowerment, taking full responsibility, is mind your mind. Think
Mhm.
about what you're thinking over and over again, because it becomes a pattern. And I'm sure you've read this research, and I think some of the research that's coming out on thinking process is that we're thinking 60,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of that is habituated. Over 80% of that is negative. We're just
Yep.
conditioned in that state. And I think your book serves as such a needed change. And I really, really, I probably will start recommending that book to my YTT students now, because I love these shifts in perspective in this way. Because I love how you describe that, Dan. This is really incredible to me, because when I talk to you about the patients that is listening to this, I think they can look to this book to sort of reformulate this idea of symptoms that they have, and then better managing it as a positive as opposed to the negative, because either way, we have it. Here you are with what is, the power of now. This is what you've got. And I've learned, whether good or bad or indifferent, if we can fully accept it in the now, that we can make anything out of anything. And that choice that we have and the shift we make, it's that power of attraction, or law of attraction at play, negative or positive. So if you're
That's right.
attracting all the negative constantly, well, guess what? You really have to take a better look at yourself, and how honest are you with yourself?
Yep.
You
And
know?
if you're wondering if that's a pattern for you,
Yeah.
okay, if something happens once in your life, it may be an anomaly. Okay.
Uh-huh.
If it happens twice, it should immediately command your attention. You're
Yeah.
like, okay, wait, what is this? If it happens 3 times, it's absolutely a pattern.
Yeah.
Right. And so, until and unless you learn what that is trying to teach you, it will keep showing up in increasingly bigger ways.
This
For
is so
example, for example,
yeah.
financial investments gone south.
Uh-huh.
Like you lose this money because you spent this money on something you didn't like. This was a pattern for me. And it's like, oh, okay, I tried this thing and it didn't work out. I lost some money, big deal. And then I did it. Something happened again, and it's always a bigger deal. And then it was like the third time I was like, okay, hold on. What's the pattern here? Because clearly this is something I'm trying to learn. And what I figured out was, don't be motivated by the quick win, and also don't invest in things you don't completely understand. If it sounds too good to be true, like whatever, or bad relationships, or hiring the wrong people in your business, or whatever it is. Like it starts by taking responsibility and saying, even if it appears like this was out of my control, there was some element of it that was absolutely my doing.
Yeah.
And so until and unless I get clear around what that intention is and how I can own that, then,
The
it's going to
lesson
probably
will keep coming until you learn it.
That's right.
Yeah. So tell me, what motivated or inspired you to write this book in particular, Positive Chaos?
Well, it had been a while since my last book, and I'm not one of these authors where it's like a new book every year or every 2 years. I just keep writing something because honestly, I think there's way too many books out there. And I think a lot of people in this like motivational world or business books, it's a lot of the same ideas over and over again. In fact, they're all universal truths and principles that are repackaged and rethought of in new ways, right? And so I didn't want to ever just do that. In fact, I wanted to wait until I felt I had something that was substantial to offer and a little different. And so for me, the whole pattern, the lifeline pattern and the connection of the infrastructure of your life and work-life integration, off balance on purpose. At the time that came out, that was really new. And people were still talking about compartmentalizing your life. And then again, for me, it was just hearing this word chaos over and over again. We're in the chaos. It's chaotic. It's this, it's that. And, I like to flip things around. I do. I like to play with language and take something that sounds counterintuitive, off balance on purpose. What? You're right. I want to achieve balance. No, you don't. Yeah, that's not what you get. You don't achieve it. Like I want that idea, that title that was like play with people's ideas and kind of mean something to everyone in a different way. And so for me, positive chaos was a similar way to play around with this thing that was being thrown at people as like this negative circumstance. Say, no, there's incredible chaos. There's opportunities for you to create chaos in the world that'll bring incredible impacts that you don't yet know for yourself and for people around you. You just need to get started. You need to get a little more clarity, a little more courageous.
How do you get more clarity in a situation where it's really, really chaotic for a lot of people?
I think it's different for everyone. For me, again, it goes back to the physical discipline. I can't tell you the number of times that, at the end of a yoga class, when we're just kind of incorporating the whole experience, laying there on the mat, I just get a rush of ideas. I get clarity about something. I get a new topic that I want to incorporate into a weekly video. By the way, for your listeners, I do this series every Tuesday of my weekly coaching series. I've actually used your inspiration a couple of different times. This is the, we're going to throw this up real quick. This is the URL. If you wanted to get that,
please grab it.
Yeah, grab it and that'll go to your inbox, or you can follow me on LinkedIn. We also post it there. And this is typically for my audiences, the people who see my keynotes, just a way to stay in touch. They're 2.5 minutes, roughly, sometimes shorter, never more than 3. And it's just a great way to stay in the flow of what I'm thinking and creating, and just reminders that keep you connected to these principles. But, I know everybody's inboxes are full and their lives are full, but this is something you can use, but also share with people you're trying to lead or love or inspire.
So just to finish off, I want to know personally for me, because I think you do incorporate a lot of somatic practices in your life. Clearly, somatic means movement. Mm-hmm. Whether it be unicycling, going upside down, acrobatics, and yoga. How do you think that helps you to clarify, to bring that clarity, and more importantly, to get into that flow of creative side?
It is so essential to me, Connie. I go crazy if I don't have it. I don't understand how other people can function without it.
Yeah.
But again, that's how I'm wired, and I've come to understand that it's not necessarily that way for everyone, but I think it could be, and this story will, it circles back to you in a way, but, I had this problem because I was always as a kid running around barefoot, stubbing my big toes over and over and over again until I wore down all the cartilage on my big toes. And I had what's that?
I said patterns.
Patterns, right? Bone spurs over time. And then I ultimately went and I saw an orthopedist, right? I saw an orthopedist probably at this point almost 20 years ago, 15 years ago at least, closer to 20. And yeah, we can remove those bone spurs. Very painful surgery to do that, by the way. They cut open your big toe. They shave these away. And by the way, you're going to have to do this again. And we're going to have to do the other foot pretty soon too. I'm like, that was so painful. No way. And then he put me in orthotics, right? Orthotics are those hard shell sole things that keep your foot, in that shape and that unusual, like reinforce your arch. And you can't walk around barefoot anymore. Like, don't even be barefoot. Like, you're going to have to wear shoes even around the house. It took me about a week to figure out that ain't going to work. That this is dumb. I'm not going to do that. And then I started reading about books about letting your feet function as feet and letting your body move like it's supposed to move. And you learn how, and then basically over time, listening to your body and what it has to tell you. And that's the beauty of movement, is the more you put into it, the more you have this relationship with your physical range of motion, and you understand the system that is your body way better than these doctors do, who specialize in a tiny little specialty that's about one part of your body that's removed from everything else. And so I just say that to say, like, I've gotten more functionality back in my feet, and I've learned things from you and your instructors, such as, the muscles that build up in your feet and your ankles will, like, you can grow those faster than almost any other, because they're the ones that are so essential to your movement and to your survival. And that's how we migrated as a species. And, it's an incredible, ever deepening journey. But somatic practices are also what I teach with my audience. I teach audiences to balance peacock feathers, or to juggle objects with me on stage, or to breathe, in ways that are helpful, but there's a lot to learn. Still.
Well, I just want to say that I know that you're in a completely different field, but it's so parallel the way you think, because in essence, you pretty much said all the little spheres of your life, they don't coexist. They don't exist by themselves, that it's an integrated whole, and it's a whole system that works together, that it'll never be balanced, but it's always going to be off balance. But so as long as you're in alignment with your spheres, that off balance is a dynamic process that is never going to be achieved per se. But the key is to always be dynamic and be in the flow and be open to possibilities, and more importantly, change. And I think, like you said at the end about the specialists in the medical field, I think we have specialists for pretty much every body part. And I've been in that system for so long, which I think we do it just because it's always been done that way. But I think I, like you, have decided one day that that is a faulty system. And I think there are many people that you and I talk about in terms of podcasting and this whole new way of looking at wellness. I think there's some revolutionary ways of thinking, adopting a lot of the practices even you mentioned into our health, because it's a big component, but it's not. To me, what you talked about today is how to be whole again as a human being. And I do think it's universal to everybody that's listening here. And I do believe this is going to be such a great conversation that people can understand more about themselves and about where they're going. Do you have anything to add after that about some of your health endeavors too? I would love to know.
Well, I'm always trying to work on, eating well, how that changes. It's funny how these little things, like, what is healthy for you to eat? That seems like it should be an easy question to answer, but it's not, because everybody's got different opinions, and there's the deeper you go down that rabbit hole and you understand how our food is processed and
The
how
more confused you get.
the more confused you get.
Yeah.
But again, you listen to your body and you do things. But and then sleep's a big thing for me, that I could be a lot better at sleep.
Yeah.
But over time we work on these things. But no, I'm confident that I'm on the right road, and certainly in your practice. I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
So what's next for you with regard to your business and how you're growing, and your concept and your vision of how you're going to change the world, Connie?
Okay, Dan. Well, I never envisioned it as something big. And I think I was in that negative cycle for a while, and I had to really definitely hone in on my negative patterns. And I've had to shift that around in the biggest way possible. And I think right now, the way things are standing, I'm feeling the best I've ever felt, despite all the mishaps that I have had in my crisis, in my health. Most people know about it. But I really lost faith in the medical system early March after having the transplant, getting that taken out. And then we didn't share all this story, and then to be told that they're going to completely dismiss me because I'm too complicated for them to handle. There was a lot of medical negligence, in my opinion. It's my humble opinion. I'm not going to speak to that. But also, I felt like what I believed in so much has let me down. So to your point, to your question, my vision is to share in this practice, because this yoga really does integrate you as a whole. And I do believe in the practice so much. Alignment and posture, yes, physically, but I think that alignment and posture, exactly what you're talking about, it's that inner alignment. It's that spiritual alignment within myself. And then I'm always asking the question, am I postured to be healthy? Am I postured for a great class? Am I postured to be ready for the unknown and then be expecting the best I can receive, as opposed to being the fear of it all? And so that's really, in essence, what I want to share. And then I'm developing the Functional Yoga Medicine Academy, sharing the trainings to kind of equip as many people as possible. We're getting a lot of nurses and healthcare practitioners coming my way, and they want a different approach, and they see the radicalness of what I'm doing, and it's working. And I get a lot of reviews and testimonials from my patients that's been coming to me for a long time, and they're like, this is changing my life. And who knew yoga would? But I think it's exactly what you talked about today, Dan. It's an inside job of shifting that change within you. And then when you can be aligned fully in those spheres that you talk about, well, then health is inevitable. You know, you're happy doing what you do. I've never once seen you tired, even despite you just came back from a Dubai trip one day, and then you showed up to a yoga class early in the morning. Did you look tired? No, you had the biggest smile on your face. You had the best, and you always put out the best. And I think that energy.
Stephanie's seen me tired.
Stephanie's going to be tired.
I said know. Rarely.
Hi, Stephanie. He'll let you go to sleep after this. But yeah, I just want to thank you for your time and willingness. And always, Dan, I've been so grateful. You've been sharing your book with my team. And I just have so much respect for you. And you've been telling me about what you did for a long time. And I don't think it was like several months ago that I finally looked you up, and I'm like, holy cow. This is amazing. And then I started to see, oh my gosh. And then I do believe every time I look at you, I'm like, success does leave clues. Mm-hmm. And there's something about you. You always have that success attitude in everything that you do. In every pose, you give it 110%. Don't think I don't notice, Dan. You're just fiercely focused when you're in your practice, and I just have so much respect for you. And I want to get
for noticing. That's really encouraging, because it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard, but you go at it like a pro. So I'm always impressed. So
wonderful. Well, we'll see you again soon.
Dan. Yeah. Well, so how long are you in town?
I'm in town. I leave next week for Wisconsin on Wednesday.
Okay.
So
So you'll be here for a little bit.
Yeah,
So,
I'm bringing some friends to the studio on Thursday, two of my other speaker buddies.
okay.
And this will be their first time there. So
Okay.
they're taking Jessica's Hot 60
Amazing.
Thursday afternoon. Yeah.
I'll be there too.
Thursday morning.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I usually go to that class anyway, but also Dan, I want you to talk about where people can find you again, both state your website and your social.
So danthurman.com, THURMON, is where you can see some of my weekly coaching videos. They're all cataloged and searchable, danthurman.com. And that's also where you can also see the research that Connie referred to early in this podcast.
Most of information on that website, by the way.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot there. You can dig down deep. And if you really want to get to know me, search Maggie Thurman and Maggie's dad, and then go down a rabbit hole of a lot of fun things that we've done together too. But
yeah, all your links will be provided in the show notes, you guys too. So you can find the Dan Thurman there. I thank you for your time, Dan, and I look forward to many, many more classes with you. And
same here, Connie.
We'll get together soon. Let's go have lunch.
Okay. I'm going to teach you how to juggle too.
Yes. I so want to learn that. You look so amazing doing it. I'm like, oh my gosh. All right. Take care now.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Mind Your Health podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, we would so much love it and appreciate it if you share it with someone who could benefit as well as to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else where podcasts are found. And leave us a review. We would be so grateful, and it helps us to reach more people just like you, so you can become more empowered to enjoy longevity and health. You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube at Dr. Connie Chung. And of course, you can subscribe to this podcast for a new episode every single